Dom Flemons. Photo by Tim Duffy. Calgary Dom Flemons' enthusiasm is infectious. The musician is on the line with Postmedia from Florida, where he recently played shows in support of his Grammy-nominated record, Black Cowboys. The album, released by Smithsonian Folkways Recordings, was made in conjunction with the National Museum of African American History and Culture and celebrates the largely under-celebrated contributions African American pioneers made to the westward expansion. But at this particular moment, Flemons is excited about a black cowboy he just recently discovered. After a show in Saskatoon last week, Flemons heard the story of John Ware, Alberta's own black cowboy. As most Albertans know, Ware was a freed slave who overcame racism to become an instrumental figure in the province's ranching history. Flemons heard the broad strokes of the story in Saskatoon, but had no idea of Ware's place of esteem as a historical figure in Calgary, where Flemons will play March 8 and 9 at the Arts Commons Engineer There Theatre. He is surprised to learn the city has a school named after him. When told a National Film Board of Canada documentary is being made here about Ware by playwright, author and filmmaker Cheryl Fogo, and that Calgarians James Davidge and Bob Prodor published a graphic novel about the man back in 2010, Flemons becomes positively giddy. "I would love to see any of this," Flemons says. "If you have any links to any of that, I would love to know about it." A lot of times in terms of the depictions of popular culture, like in a slave movie, for example, many of the slaves are going to Canada but we never hear a story about what happens when they get to Canada, he adds. So it was very interesting to hear this particular story about a man who escaped slavery, made it to Canada and then, in spite of the obstacles he faced, became a very successful cattle rancher. It's a reminder that Flemons is a lifelong student of history. Roughly a decade ago, the Arizona-born, Washington-based historian and musician discovered the book The Negro Cowboys by Philip Durham and Everett L. Jones, which sent him on a 10-year journey researching the largely hidden histories of African American cowboys. Before he knew it, he was 40 books deep into the subject. While Black Cowboys came out a year ago, he obviously isn't finished with his research. Discovering figures such as John Ware for the first time is clearly still a source of great joy for Flemons. "I find this particular subject constantly humbling and illuminating at the same time," he says. "There's a million stories out there," which brings us to Black Cowboys. It's a rollicking 18-song collection of traditional songs, obscurities and Flemons' own originals. He's a Lone Ranger is Flemons' take on the larger-than-life adventures of Bass Reeves, an escaped slave who became the first African-American deputy U.S. Marshal. Steel Pony Blues is a tribute to Nat Love, a former slave-turned-railway porter who became an Arizona rancher. $1 Bill is about how Hollywood portrayed black cowboys in westerns. Even when he tackles a song as well known as Home on the Range, easily one of the most popular cowboy songs in history, Flemons unearths some interesting tidbits for the liner notes. It turns out that song was first recorded in 1908 by an African-American cook in San Antonio. Goodbye Old Paint, another cowboy favorite, was once credited to white fiddler Jess Morris, but he actually learned it from a former slave named Charlie Willis. All of this, and much more, is lovingly explained in Flemons' extensive liner notes, a 40-page booklet that outlines his journey through this history. It turned into more than just cowboys, Flemons says. It turned into early pioneers. It turned into religious groups that made their way out west. It also turned into Africans. Some were enslaved, but there were even stories of Africans that just came over from Africa to settle in different parts of the West. There's such a diverse number of stories that it really shocked me that this idea of black cowboys could expand so far open, which is not to say that Black Cowboys is a purely academic exercise. It's also a lot of fun. Nicknamed the American Songster, Flemons has earned a reputation for his command of American folklore and song forms that span more than 100 years. Black Cowboys shows his prowess when it comes to traditional folk and roots music, mixing cowboy poetry, field hollers, bluegrass, string blues and square dance music. Flemons first gained prominence as a founding member of the Carolina Chocolate Drops, the old-time string band he formed with Rhiannon Giddens and Justin Robinson in North Carolina in 2005. Flemons left the group in 2013 for a solo career. But even before he helped revive old-time string music with the Drops, Flemons was fascinated by how history and music intersect. When I first started playing music, I was always drawn to the history and the stories of the songs and the performers, he says. It started out with 1950s rock and roll and 1960s folk music. It started out with learning the stories of people like Chuck Berry or John Lennon and Paul McCartney, or Bob Dylan, or Dave Van Ronk, Howlin' Wolf, Hank Williams and all these different people. They had extraordinary stories, all of them, along the way. Flemons also developed some fierce chops as a multi-instrumentalist. His one-man shows in Calgary will feature everything from banjo breakdowns to harmonica instrumentals to country blues and bluegrass. He will also offer a sampling of the quills, which are panpipes originally played by slaves. The early folk instrument features prominently on Charmin' Betsy, just one of many Black Cowboys tracks Flemons intends to play live. It's been a full circle for me, having come to Arizona, and to be able to return to Arizona by the way of Western music, he says. It's been a beautiful thing to be able to reclaim a part of my Western heritage. As I've gone along, I've been able to appreciate my family and my ancestors way back in a whole new way that I didn't before this project. Dom Flemons plays the Engineered Air Theatre at Arts Commons March 8 and 9 at 8 p.m.